Years old, and I'm going to tell you a story about how a classic horror movie plot came true in real life. Recently, my family went through a huge tragedy. My grandpa passed away. He used to be a people person and a well-known dentist, so it was also a great loss for a lot of people in our town. My mum and grandpa had always been very close, so she was absolutely broken. There was nobody who could be there for her, really. My dad was very busy at work, which only left me. So, one day I was surfing the internet and I found a support group for people who had lost their loved ones. I told my mum about it just in case, and she agreed to go. Everything went well. There were a lot of people who shared their own stories, and it seemed that my mum was starting to feel better. But after the meeting, an old couple came up to us. They were very nice and charming. They said that they had known my grandpa pretty well and that they all had to stick together, and invited Mum and me for dinner. But I felt there was something wrong about the whole situation. They said they'd seen us at the meeting, but I couldn't remember them sitting in the hall with us. On the way back home, I told my mum that I wasn't sure if this was a good idea, like to go over to those people's house, but she wouldn't listen, so we went to their place that next Saturday. The dinner was delicious, and my mum's new friends talked non-stop about how great of a man my grandpa was, which made her just shine. I got really tired and excused myself to go to the bathroom, but I actually didn't go. I just started walking around the house. This couple had a very cozy home. Everything looked nice and comfortable, but then I noticed a little door. It was not locked, so I went in, and you just won't believe what I saw in there. There were strange crosses hanging on the walls, candles, jars with salt, or something, and other freaky stuff. This room looked absolutely nothing like the rest of the house. I have to say that I was completely freaked out. I came back to the table, but didn't say a word about what I had just seen. And when I told my mum about it afterwards, she didn't even pay any attention to me. It seemed like she was absolutely fascinated by those people. And this was just the beginning of it. This old couple started showing up more and more often. They had literally become my mother's best and only friends, to the point where she wouldn't even answer her old friends' calls anymore. She wanted to spend all of her time with Mr. and Mrs. Devon. I tried to tell my dad, but he didn't see a problem. He said if it made Mum happier, then there was nothing bad about it. But I did see a problem. One day I noticed that Grandpa's gold watch had disappeared. We put it on the shelf in the living room in memory of him, but it wasn't there anymore. I asked my mum about it, and she said that she had put it away. But I had my doubts. As time passed, I noticed that newer and newer things kept disappearing. One evening, my father got a message on his phone. It said that our family bank account had been closed. My dad called the bank immediately, and they said that it was my mum who had done it. My father went pale. That was the bank account with all the money my family actually had, and Grandpa's inheritance as well. And it wasn't until now that he finally believed me that there was something wrong with my mum and her new friends. When my mother came back home that evening, my dad attacked her with questions about the bank account. She was very calm and did not even try to conceal that she had taken all the money. Mum said that it was all for a great purpose and that she had a reason, which we could never manage to find out. My dad was speechless and completely lost, but I had worked out a plan. The next evening, when my mother dressed up and drove away, we got into Dad's car and started following her. We drove a long way, farther and farther from town, and stopped where there was only trees around. She got out of the car and just walked directly into the forest. We tried to move quietly so that Mum didn't know we were following her. It was completely dark everywhere, and then we saw an old cabin through the trees. Mum went inside and disappeared. My dad and I were terrified. Dad wanted to call the police, but I insisted that we had to figure it all out ourselves first. So we entered the cabin with our legs shaking. We heard voices coming from somewhere down below. We didn't have the courage to go downstairs, so we tried to find a place where we could hear what was going on down there. We entered a small room and saw that there were holes in the floor, so we had the perfect vantage point to be able to see what was happening. There were 3 people wearing black gowns, Mr. and Mrs. Devon and my mum. They were reading some prayer, I guess, and sitting around. Grandpa's portrait! I couldn't believe my eyes! After an hour of the ritual, everyone left, but my father and I couldn't move or talk. I had a lot of questions. What was the purpose of that ritual? What did those people want from my mother? My father and I both realized that my mother was trapped. We had to find a way to save her. We surfed the internet day and night to try and find any information about this cult, but it was useless. We couldn't find anything. But one day my father came home from work very late. He quietly came into the kitchen and put a sheet of paper on the table. My mum looked at it and screamed. It was a picture of Mr. and Mrs. Devon with a wanted sign below their photos. It turned out that Dad was in complete despair and went to the police station. While he was there, he suddenly saw those familiar faces hanging on the wall. My mother rushed to her phone, trying to reach Mr. or Mrs. Devon, with no luck. We never, ever saw them again, or our money. Oh, this is the most unbelievable story that has ever happened to my family. But I have to admit that it was my dad's and my fault that we couldn't manage to find the time or the right words for my mother when she was feeling so down and miserable. We may have lost all of our money, but we got our mum back. And I think we still need more time to completely get over all of this. Do you know what it's like when your friends and parents get themselves in trouble? If you do, you don't know how important it is to get them to stop before it's too late. Share this video with your friends, because you never know